All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Welcome to the #1 show on innovative teamwork. And shout out again to podmatch.com that has done an absolutely incredible job in connecting me with some absolutely incredible people. To my regular listeners, you already know how it gets down, man. When you hit the play button on this show, get your minds right because you know it's going to be whether it's myself or somebody else coming on. We're giving you some gems. We're giving you just a little bit, just something to get you through the moment. Today, Miss Kisha Wynter, we are in for a treat because we will have yet another person that comes on with an incredible acronym that is made to help you, whether it's DIVA, GPS, tons of things that she's done in her career to not only just help women, but also help men as well. And most importantly, she has a Caribbean background. So,
Hey.
you already know what we're about to get into. So all that being said, Kisha, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am great and excited to be here.
Yeah,
Truly.
so like I was telling you before we started recording, I just recently, as of this recording, just recently finished a family or came back to Florida from a family reunion in Trinidad and Tobago. And
Ooh.
so much of those 5 days were spent, really reflecting on my parents, my mother and my father, who have both are in situations where they left property for us. They're, like talking about their old neighborhoods and we drove around the
Yes.
island. And I'm thinking in my
Yes.
head, man, it's such an incredible opportunity that we have to be growing up in the States and to see what they
Yes.
built from where they came from.
Came
I
from.
remember I was telling my mom, man, you may not be Warren Buffett, but you are rich compared to what you actually came from. And
Came
you
from.
you have a similar backstory. So I'll give you the floor. I'll give you the microphone for a second to speak on that a little bit because a lot of people can see you now on YouTube and doing shows and doing speaking and think it just happened when in reality, it did not just happen like that. There was a lot of
Did
people
just.
that have sacrificed and things like that to make it so you have that opportunity. So go
Ooh,
ahead.
what a setup.
Yeah. Oh
What a
yeah.
setup.
This is the #1 show on innovative tech. I keep telling people, listen, this is what we do. We don't play no games. This is what I do. Okay.
Yes, this is what you do. I love it. And it's really important to really take a step back and look at how far we've come personally and the work that was done to get us here.
Yes, ma'am.
One, just so that we can be grateful because there's always, when we're in this space, we're always working on developing ourselves personally, right?
Mhm.
But we don't really take a step back and say, dang, I did all that. This is where I came from. I
Yep.
may not be exactly where I want to be,
Yep.
but I have done a lot of work to get where I am today. And
Absolutely.
so and so for me, I mean, I moved to the US myself when I was young, but my parents, my mom in particular, she paved the way,
Yeah.
right? She paved the way. She left her family to be able to come and help to school me. Now, like basically my entire family is here now. And so it blows my mind, right? People, to your point, people look at me now and they're like, oh, Kisha has a company right now where she's coaching leaders from over 50 countries globally,
Yeah.
right? She right now she's had experience working in Fortune 500 companies, actually Fortune 20 companies for 20 years.
Right.
But when I looked at the top of the organizations at the time, when I was in my early 20s, I didn't think that leadership was something that I could do.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because when I looked at the top, I didn't see people that looked like me,
Mm.
that sounded like me with the Caribbean accent,
Exactly.
that, I felt they didn't have this personality. I'm here talking now,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a natural introvert.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I looked at the top, there was a prototype of what executives and seniors look like.
Right.
And I didn't see myself in that reflection.
Right.
And so the first time, and I talk a lot about self-doubt, imposter syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
feeling that you don't belong. We don't talk a lot about the treatment, imposter treatment, actually being treated also as if you don't belong. That's a whole other conversation.
Exactly.
Um, but the first time I had a meeting with an executive and he came to my cube because I was in the office yet. So like, I need to talk to you about the leadership on my team.
Yeah.
And I was like, you want to talk to me? Like, first of all, you're like 20 years older than me. Your entire team has all this experience.
Right.
And immediately that self-doubt came to me. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. What am I going to tell him that he doesn't already know? And I say this to people all the time. Like, we regularly underestimate the brilliance that we bring to the table because it's just so natural to us. So at the time, I wasn't in connection with my strengths. And so I went into his office. I fully expected it to be a 5-minute conversation and for him to kick me out of the office. And but to my surprise, that didn't happen. I looked up. I'm like, giving him my thoughts off the top of my head is what I'm thinking. And I not only is he keenly listening, but he's furiously taking notes. And I'm like, what are you writing down?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that, oh, right, my life experiences, my training, my education, even though he has 20 years of experience, I have a different perspective that I'm bringing to the table. And it brings me right back to, our background and our history,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a lot of people in corporate America right now that they don't feel as if they belong. They don't feel as if, leadership is something in store for them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see the people at the top looking like them.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that conversation, something in me really shifted that day. And I recognized that, hey, like, not only do I belong
Mm-hmm.
in this room, but I'm capable of leading it. Not only can I play with the big boys, as they say,
Right.
but they can learn a thing or two from me, just like I'm learning for them. And that is why,
Mm-hmm.
I do leadership development, executive coaching, consulting for women, and we're going to, and for men as well. I coach men as well. And
Right.
we're going to get more into that. But when I realized that the true imposter was self-doubt and not me,
Mm-hmm.
everything shifted. And that inspired me from that day to really focus on helping people in corporate, especially people that come from diverse backgrounds, especially people that are first generation immigrants or immigrants themselves,
Yeah.
um, to recognize that they also belong at the table, that they can step into their power and own it,
Mm-hmm.
that they can unleash that inner brilliance that is within them, and then turn that inner critic into that inner coach. And that is why I focus on doing that now, because I believe that there's a seat at the table for all of us. Not only is there a seat at the table, but we all need to be at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is just a little bit about me and why I do what I do and my background.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I give this some context because people listening may not know exactly where you've been. But so when you move, after you moved to the States, eventually you were able to land a job. Was it GE Capital in that? So
Yeah.
a little bit about what you saw during those experiences, because I believe you mentioned it was working in those experiences that really there was some intimidation there, but eventually you were able to build the confidence over time to where eventually you were able to start your own business. And whenever I hear of a situation like that, I always think back to what's being taught in the home, what's being how you're
Yes.
like similar to you. I would see my mother. One of the reasons I'm so efficient with my time now is I would see my mother. We'd wake up, we'd go work out, we'd go get a haircut, then she'd go to the grocery store. Immediately we'd come back, she'd have the food torn out and stuff like that, put certain things in the oven, maybe take a nap. By the time maybe 11 a.m., everything was done. Oh yeah, then by the way, she'd put the laundry in and all that. So everything was done work-wise, workout-wise, grooming-wise, everything done by 11 a.m. And
Yes,
always
yes.
attribute to these things or watching these things to just seeing how efficiently she moved. And this ain't got nothing to do necessarily with school, but all about
Right.
being taught in the home. So speak
Yes.
on kind of your experiences from, whether it's home, school, and then getting ready for GE and how that led you into, entrepreneurship and consulting and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, my mom is a beast.
Yeah, that's
That's
like and so many, and this is why I was so excited to have you on because so many Caribbean women don't realize the power and the strength that they have because there's
she's a
so much
beast.
stereotypes out there. You see us twerk and party, and don't get me wrong, we like to party and all that, but that is not what
That's
Caribbean.
not the full story.
That's what I'm
Like,
saying. That's
yes,
not
we
what
know
we
how
do.
to have fun,
Yeah, but
but
that's not our whole thing, right?
when it's time to work, it's time to work. And I'm going to that, but it's funny that you should bring that up because I was watching a clip of some video on Instagram, and it talked about how commentators are saying Simone Biles and then is naturally gifted at what she does, how Usain Bolt, right, is a natural runner. And I'm like, But by saying that they're just naturally good and they were born this way, you're undermining and taking away the grit, the
Exactly.
hard work, the discipline, the getting up at 4 a.m. And
Yeah.
you're not giving credit to that hard work that
Yeah.
was done. And so I have a whole method that I talk about advancing, but
Yeah.
and I'll
I gotta
get
send
into
you this.
it. Oh, yeah.
I teach at this school named Center for Creative Education. I'll put a video out there. I'll send it to you. But there was a young Jamaican girl early one morning because we're talking about the Olympics. She asked me if I had any like clips on my phone or whatever to watch, and I asked her if she knew who Usain Bolt was, and she goes, "No, I don't know him. I almost lost it." So I'm sending her. I'm like, you got to know this girl, So it is so important that you said that. I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but I
Yeah,
want.
yeah, no. I mean, I'm like,
Go
okay, like I've been to Dubai. The first thing that greeted
Yes.
me was Usain Bolt. I've been to Argentina. The first thing greeted
Mhm.
me, like, how do
Yeah.
you not know Usain Bolt?
Yeah.
Okay, totally
Yeah.
different conversation. But right, and so there is not this credit. There's always this credit that the boom bye bye and all this stuff of just rapping on the song and the dance on music and all that. But
Mhm.
there's not enough credit that's given to that determination,
Mhm.
that consistency, that hard work. So my mom, I don't know how she did it, right? She gets up first things in the morning, she cooks, she cleans, she goes to work, then she comes home and she takes care of the kids. She
Right.
does everything, right? And also at the time, without a college, without a high school
Yeah.
education, my mom didn't go back to school and get her GED until she was in her 60s after I graduated from college and had my master's degree. She
Yeah.
put everybody first
Yeah.
and invested. And I tell this to people all the time. I mean, I have a benefit of having my formative years
Mhm.
in a majority people of color, Black country
Yeah.
at the time. And so even though I never saw myself at the table because I didn't see people at the top looking like me,
Mhm.
I never thought that I didn't have the ability to get there. Why? One, because I saw it modeled from when I was a child. But
And
two, because my mom said, nobody can tell you you can't do anything. Like nobody can tell you you can't do it. You can do whatever you want. As
yes.
long as you're willing to put in so that hard work and that ethic to this day, my mom is 73 years old now.
Mhm.
She doesn't stop.
Yes.
She
This is
doesn't
something,
stop
I gotta pause you there because I want the listeners to make sure they pay attention to this. This is happening in the home. All right.
in
You
the home.
depend on the school system. You cannot depend
Oh,
on the environment of the corporate, whatever you're using to try to help raise your kids, TV and YouTube. What's happening in the home is there's a model behavior, and
the
there's a
model behavior.
the young girl who is of color, who doesn't see anybody that looks like her, but she's still developing the confidence because of what she's seeing from her mother. That is what we have to emphasize, people. What's happening in the home, people are watching you. Young people are
People are
watching
watching. And my mom is not a big talker.
you. Mhm.
They say
Yeah,
full of big chat or
right,
whatever.
right, right,
My mom is not the big talker,
right, right.
right? At the end of the day, she's not the big talker, but she gets it done.
Mhm.
She does what she needs to do. Even to this day, I have a book coming out and I was like so frustrated about like my formatting that just came back. And it's like,
Right.
5 weeks before.
I've been there.
And, she goes into her, oh, there you
I
go.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh, I'm so frustrated. And she goes right into it's like, well, we do what we gotta do. Like,
Mhm.
if we gotta stay up all night and get it done, right? Do what you have to do. And so that was my biggest motivator then, and even to this day, is seeing how far. And my mom, at least I can see my dad came from more affluent beginnings in Jamaica, but
Mhm.
my mom didn't, right? She grew up in a rural area where they didn't have electricity. She had to literally walk with her mom with a donkey to town to sell things, right? um and this is where she's coming from. Like the home that she lived in, if they had hurricanes now, it would have been one of the first homes to fall flat
Yeah.
because it wasn't a strong structure. And she has 8 brothers and sisters living all over the world now between the US, England and Canada. You know how the Caribbean people do.
Yeah.
That's where we go.
Right. There's
And
yeah, good.
I was just gonna say, and so for me, that's what I learned from her is one, you can do anything and you just got to put in the work. in
Right.
order to accomplish whatever you want. And that right there was the basis of everything. Because I tell people all the time, I can come into your organization, or I can work with you individually to help you advance. But if you're not working, if you're not putting in the work, if you're not putting in the reps,
Right.
there's nothing I could do to save you, right? Because you have to have that work ethic. Bottom line, that's the foundation.
Right. So, okay. So you go through school, and is GE the first job that you have?
No, 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 no,
How
no,
did
it's
that
not.
transition work when you,
And so my first job out of college was
and
working
what
with,
school did you go to?
well, Cal State Long Beach. So I
Okay.
lived in California
Okay.
before. So I went to Cal State, I lived in Fresno, and then I went to Cal State Long Beach. And
And were
I,
you
I
studying, like, were you studying leadership development there? What was
no,
the,
no, I thought I was going to
another
work for
point.
the,
Yeah, that's what
yeah.
another point. A lot of times people go to school not realizing what it is specifically they want to do, when it's kind of a, you have to build, you have, it's like, I look at it as, jumping out of a plane and having to build your wings on the way down and stuff like that. So speak on your experience there.
Yeah, I went to Cal State Long Beach and I studied international studies,
Hmm.
minored in Spanish. And I thought to myself, I was gonna work either for the United Nations doing something human rights, international human rights related, just because of my international background, or
Hmm.
do immigration law. That was my initial thought.
Okay.
And, I graduated from college. By that time, my family had moved to the East Coast in the New York area. So I'm in Stamford, Connecticut now.
Okay.
And I live 45 minutes north of New York City.
All right.
And so I came out here and I just said, okay, what are the biggest companies here? I'm just going to start working,
Right.
thinking about going to law school and all that.
Hmm.
And I just literally just went and got a temp job at Citibank, and then they hired me full time.
Hmm.
And in credit, just random, like I just temped, what, because right out of college, sometimes you don't get that job right away. You don't really know how to find what you want, all
Right.
the fairs and all this job fairs you can go to. I
Right.
didn't know about that at the time. And so I went through a temp agency, got a job at Citibank. They thought, oh, this girl has really good work ethic.
Yeah.
They hired me in the credit department. I have no like financial background
Exactly.
or anything like
Right.
that, but it was just sheer work. I just did the
Exactly.
work. I got it done. They
Mhm.
hired me. And I won't get into like the crazy stuff that happened, but something happened where a transition of moving us from Stanford to the Wall Street area, which is quite the commute.
Mhm.
It was it was almost 2 hours because it was a Midtown, Manhattan. And I was like, you guys didn't give me no notice, because they didn't want quite a few people to leave.
Mhm.
And so literally they told us a week before that they're moving our office with expectation that I'm like, no, I'm not. And of course I went to my family.
Mhm.
I was just like, this is what they do. She's like, no, girl, you can't let these people bully you. You
Yeah.
can find a job.
Right.
And I quit. And it's funny, this is how I got into HR.
Yeah.
My first interaction with HR was I put in my resignation after they told me that I can't leave. I was like, well, you didn't give me 2 week notice that you're moving up my office 2 hours. So I'm not giving you 2 weeks notice.
Mhm.
And so then I spoke to HR because I had to. I didn't know what HR did. And she basically was like, what? Like, we've been doing preparations and prepping the leaders for the last 2 months. They should have told you at least 6 weeks ago. This
Wow.
is ridiculous.
Huh.
And she became such a big advocate and ended up paying me, even though I had only worked there for 18 months.
Okay.
It was under 2 years, 4 weeks of severance plus additional payments.
Awesome.
And I said, wow, what an advocate. And that's literally how I decided. I was like, I want to do that. I want to
Yeah.
advocate for
So
employees. I
that's how
want to
you
go
got
into
into
HR. That's
the HR.
literally how I got into it.
That's
And then
amazing. Yeah.
I just decided I wanted to do that. And then I looked at the biggest company in Stamford, Connecticut at the time, in Fairfield County, was GE. And I was just like, well, I worked for Citibank. I
Huh.
did a little bit at UBS, but I want to work for General Electric because it's the biggest company. I knew nothing.
Right. Huh.
And so that's how I got. And then I went in from the bottom, from the floor, as an HR coordinator, and then I worked my way up into the organization. So yeah, that's how I got into human resources.
So allow me to kind of, I want to bring this kind of current, and you can talk about your transition from working for someone to eventually building your own company. When I
Yeah.
bring up, when you hear DEI hires nowadays, all right, and this is a
Yes.
topic issue, obviously standing for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And something that I actually have been very critical about when it comes to people who are not qualified, but you obviously don't fit in that category. You're someone that's very qualified
Right.
in what they do, and
Right.
you know exactly what it is you need to be doing. But when you see people who are not qualified, but they're getting positions over you because of DEI hires, and you hear the term and stuff like that, how does your business address these issues when it comes to helping business owners figure out who to hire, how to create culture, and all that kind of stuff? Because you've lived through this stuff. You're not just showing up and saying, "Hey, I'm a
Yeah.
woman, hire me." No, this is
Yeah.
actually what you've been through.
No,
You lived
no,
through it, but
no.
there are certain situations where they get hired based on just the fact that they're women. So please
Yeah.
speak on that and how your organization helps with that.
Before we get into that, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
On DEI. There is, the reason why we're here where we are today for a reason. Why there's a backlash, why there's a history behind this, right? And
Yeah.
actually, that's one, I'm not gonna get into the whole story, but that's one of the reasons I decided to personally leave corporate, because of the opposite, because people were qualified and
Mm-hmm.
people were being overlooked for roles
Mm-hmm.
because of bias.
Exactly.
And when I was in
Your thoughts on
corporate,
it, because I'm sure
yeah.
that you were in situations where it was completely opposite, where you were very qualified to do certain things.
Well, not only just me, to be
Not just
honest,
that, that you
right?
knew people that were very
I knew
qualified
because
and
of
were- yeah,
HR, because
exactly.
behind of close, we
Yeah.
would be behind closed door conversations.
I'm telling you, I've
And
had people on HR on the show, and I've spoken to people. It is I mean, you think politics is dirty, folks? Listen.
this is, and that's why I'm the expert on organizational
Yeah,
politics, because
yeah,
that's a whole other
that's
conversation.
what I'm saying.
But it actually just the opposite. What was happening pre 2020, right, at the time, was that you did have very qualified women, people of color,
Mhm,
that were not getting hired and were not getting promoted because they didn't have the connections,
mhm.
right? They didn't know the right people. They didn't have exposure to the decision makers. And
Right,
so even though they were working hard, like we just talked about, my mom taught me to work hard, and that's where they came from. They're putting
right,
in the work, they got the degree, they have the experience, because they don't live next door to the CEO,
right.
because they're not friends with this executive. They're not going playing golf because they
That is,
didn't grow up playing golf,
yeah.
right? They don't get hired. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that at the time I was doing was challenging that bias. I'm like, we are actually truly seeing discrimination, because these people from different countries, even not just, Black people from India, people from Asia, like
Exactly. And that's a
they
good
are
point that you make,
qualified.
because it isn't as a black and white thing.
It's not a black and
I want
white
to make
thing.
sure people
It's,
understand.
and
It's
people's like, yeah, like we so much focus. I'm like, the world is not black and white. We
not
literally have all colors. There's
yeah, yeah.
Latino, there's Asian,
Right.
and so for me, I'm the person that I advocate. I mean, if the white man getting discriminated against, that's what inclusion is. Like
Mhm.
I advocate for him. Like if I see the reverse, right? And so
Exactly.
one of the reasons I got discouraged was I actually, no matter how certain people, because they weren't on the inside, they
Mhm.
would get overlooked, right? They would get overlooked. By
Right.
that time, I had already known how to navigate politics, how to get advocates, all that. So I personally wasn't experiencing that by that time, but I
Right.
saw
You
it
saw it.
happen over and over again.
You
And
saw it.
so one of the things in 2020, so I left corporate the end of December 31st, 2019, started my own business, didn't like say anything about DEI, but when
I
George
mean,
Floyd
you just
happened,
put a date like literally before the world shut down, a couple months before the world shut down because of COVID.
yeah, December 31st, 2019, I left, and I didn't start my business because I was feeling burnt out. So January, I went to Canada. February, I went to Jamaica.
Mhm.
And like the week before, because,
Just
I live in the New
recharge,
York
just kind of
area.
recharge the battery, right?
Yeah, exactly. And literally the week before the shutdown happened in March, I came back to the US to start my business. So literally the first week of March, I started my business, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And I give that context because then shortly after that, George Floyd happened. Everybody was calling me
Mhm.
to do DEI work at the time. And I said, no, I'm focusing solely on leadership development and executive coaching. I'm a little bit burnt out from that space. And also, I don't want to work with organizations and people that are just having this reflex act. Oh, like, let's do something. And I'm so, right? It's
The
like,
church girl.
let's do something. And then,
Thank you. Because that's the
and
way it felt during that time. It was just
oh yeah, no.
like, where
And
was this energy before? Why can't we be like this just every day? Why does George Floyd have to happen for us to start coming together and start acting like we're, let me not, because
listen,
I'll get on a tangent on that one. Go ahead.
my phone was ringing
All right.
off the hook, and I was just like, block, nope, nope, no, not
Yeah.
talking to any of y'all. Because where were you in 2019 and 2018 when I was really talking about this stuff?
Mhm.
And so organizations reached out. I was like, first of all, I've got to protect my own mental health because I'm personally frustrated and burnt out by this situation.
Yeah.
And I'm also a spiritual person. So I was just like, this whole thing right now is just a reflex action. Everybody demonstrating, everybody, and I'm like, no, this is not healthy.
It felt for
Yeah, and
it.
I'm like, it's not healthy. I don't want to jump in just because it's trendy. And no, look, a lot of people are called for that, and I'm not diminishing people jumped in and did some important work. But then on the flip side, there was also, so I talked about the performative piece where people just jump in and they're having this reflex action and the black squares on social media and all that.
Yeah.
And then you have the people that they really don't understand what it is to build inclusive cultures. So
Mhm.
they are out here actually doing harm, right? They're having conversations where, no, like, you need to be ashamed of what you did. You can't speak up. And I'm like, okay, but how is this a healing conversation?
Exactly.
How is this uniting people? How is this bringing people together? Yes, there's accountability, which is a big part of what I talk about in coaching,
Yeah.
but it is also having a discussion that puts the brain in a receptive state. So all I see is just people doing harm to each other. And I'm like, I'm not involved.
And
And I
it
will
leads
tell
to
you,
more, well, yeah, go ahead. I'll make my point. Go
no, finish
ahead.
what you say.
The
Go
thing
ahead.
is, no, I was going to kind of pause you there only because what you're talking about leads to more divisiveness. It leads to
More
a result that you
divisiveness.
don't want to have, where people are now kind of they're afraid to speak up. They're afraid if you're of a different culture, a different race, you're afraid to ask certain questions, and you get certain folks that are afraid to offend people. And that's not the kind of culture that you want to create. You want to create
It's
a
not the
culture
kind of culture.
of
And even though I do DEI,
right.
I don't know everything about every culture. So I'm gonna make mistakes and say things that may offend
Right. And that's
or hurt
no.
or alienate, not intentionally,
Exactly.
because I don't know everything about everyone in every culture. And so we have to have, I'm not saying don't encourage people to do the work. I'm about doing the work. We just talked about that. And also educating yourself, but
Exactly.
also creating a safe space that we realize that as long as the intention isn't bad, and you know when people's intentions are bad,
Exactly.
that you're creating a safe space that you can have healthy conversations. And what I saw at the time, I won't call any books names or anything like that, but some of these books that were coming out on a New York Times bestseller, and I'm like, how? Like, this is a shaming experience. This is not a healing conversation. This is not even an accountability conversation. This is your fault, name, shame, blame.
Right.
And Brene Brown talks a lot about shame and
Yeah.
how because of that feeling of shame, you're not going to be open. And so as a result of those conversations, I decided I didn't want to get involved in that, and I didn't for
Yeah.
2 years. And then in 2022, I was doing leadership development and executive coaching with an organization, with two different organizations. And I knew the leaders. I literally knew the CEOs. I knew the people behind the scenes. I knew that they were really about doing the deep work. And I said, okay, I know that they're working on DEI work and they're a healthy organization and they want to do the right thing. I want to deal with them. I want to work with them. So that's when I decided to go back in the space. And so my philosophy is this on DEI. Like, first of all, the United States of America is the most diverse country in the world, right?
Right.
So we're not going to get rid of diversity. It's here.
It was already
Right.
here before.
It is here. We just talked about us being immigrant. Like immigrants or children of immigrants,
Yeah.
people of all different backgrounds. So we have to create a culture. If we want our companies to win, we have to create a culture where everybody thrives. And
Right.
everybody includes Black, whites, Asian, Latino. And it is also not about creating the space to shame white men, right? So I would have DEI conversations. And when I was at my old organizations, and I would literally be talking about, give your experience and share your experiences. And I would literally see some of these white men in the room and they're like super silent.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, so-and-so, like, and they're like, yeah, but like we're not diverse. And I'm like, well, this is a diverse group. Which means if you're part of the conversation as a white person, now I'm not saying to center on you and to make it all about you, but you are included in the conversation, right? And so I think when we talk a lot about DEI, there is a lot of emotion and shame and negative energy around it that causes people. Now, this is why we're seeing the backlash. That's why now we're talking about reverse racism and reverse discrimination. And in a way, it is a wake-up call for professionals and for people that are doing the work that you actually have to model inclusion in the conversation. And you have to be able to invite people to the conversation. Right. And so that's my perspective and my philosophy. But when we're not looking at it, right, there's a whole conversation now around meritocracy. And this is what was happening when I was in previous organizations, is that organizations that think that they're only promoting the studies show, and I want to dispel this myth. The studies show that organizations and people that think they're promoting basically based on meritocracy are actually more likely to display bias and discrimination because you are not vigilant on what is being considered in your promotion and in your hiring process. So I do believe that there's a place that you're like, here are the criteria, what am I missing? Right. Let's have that conversation. But it is not about hiring people that are not qualified.
Right. And
The job.
first of all, thanks for giving that context to it, because it was around that time actually that this podcast got started. And there was another guest who recommended a Brene Brown book, who, by the way, is a white guy.
Yes.
Brene Brown book, The Gift of Imperfection. And the client had at the time, we had talked about on the show about she's Venezuelan, and she was talking about how the George Floyd thing was just a reaction and things like that. So a lot of the same sentiments were back even back then when everything was going on. So, and that leads me to the next thing I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about, because I do want to be respectful of your time, and I want to make sure we talk about your current business and where you're at now. You have I believe it's another acronym called DIVA and GPS.
Yes.
You have a book that is going to be coming out. By the time this episode comes out, it'll probably be ready for orders and ready to be shipped out. So speak on, and I love the fact that you gave the context of 2020, because this is when you're starting your business. Speak on how you landed there, and then 4 years later, now you have these things going on. What are sort of what was that process like in order for you to develop that business model?
So one of the reasons I even had the courage to leave, since we're calling names now, I don't usually call the company's name General Electric, but one of the reasons I decided to leave, one of the reasons I had the courage to leave, first of all, is when I was let's go back to behind the closed door discussions when people were getting promoted. One of the things that consistently came up over and over and over again is, and now I'm going to talk about women in particular, but it affects men too. But the conversation usually started because, this woman is super smart. She has the training. She has the expertise. She does deliver results like we talk about. However, the thing that she doesn't do well is that she doesn't have a leadership presence. She doesn't own the room. She's not a bold and confident communicator. She doesn't believe in herself. And I told you the story about when I thought I wasn't good enough. It's the same thing I went through.
Yeah.
And so the conversation would be, HR people, go help them. Go tell them to be more confident. And I said, no, that's not very helpful, right? Like, first of all, we have to look at how you're deciding. This is where the DEI comes in. How you're deciding who is ready based on, and when we talk about DEI, we sometimes think about race and gender, but also styles, introversion versus extroversion,
Yeah.
right? And so, first of all, as an organization, you have to open up your mind on the various styles and think about it's not just one way to lead. There are multiple different ways to be effective. But then also on the flip side, for the woman, how do you step into that power? How do you own it? How do you make sure that you're navigating the organization so that you can be exposed to the right persons, so
Yeah.
that you can get promoted and get to that next level?
Right.
And I was seeing that this conversation was happening over and over again, and nobody had a opportunity or any insight on how to fix it. And this is how businesses start, right? There's a problem, you come up with a solution.
Got
And
to
so
fix.
my solution was that I'm going to create a coaching program
Mm-hmm.
where I gave tactical skills,
Mm-hmm.
right, to help you, first of all, deal with your feeling of not enoughness, and strategies, things to do so that you can build that confidence, not just like be motivated, but what are the daily actions that's going to build that determination, build that resiliency, build that confidence.
Right.
One, and then the second part of it I alluded to is, all right, now that you build that confidence, what do you do to navigate the organizational structure to best position yourself to
Mm-hmm.
advance in that corporation? Because we're dealing with systems, we're dealing with cultures that you have to know how to navigate it. Because if you shy away from it, you'll never become effective. And
Right.
so as a result of that problem, I designed my program. At the time, it was called Own Your Power. I rebranded it to Your Power Unleashed, which
Mm-hmm.
is the title of my book. And then I started my company. And I said I got the courage to do it because I tested the program within that company. And I did it like,
Yeah.
for four different times in, I think, 3 years, if I remember correctly. And
Right.
it was so well received that one of the leaders was just like, well, forget GE, go do a TED Talk, start a business, girl, you want to
Exactly.
something.
Exactly. Right.
And
And
this is
that's
an
how it
officer
works.
of the
And
company.
I want to make
Yeah.
that pause you there because I don't want to brush over the point you're making is you don't just go out and start a business, guys. You go fix a problem.
Yes.
Go fix a problem,
Fix the
test it with the
problem.
people that you know, or go out and meet strangers, talk to strangers, do whatever you have to do. But I love this saying, and I talk about it on the show all the time, is the audience ultimately decides. Your audience and the people that actually were benefiting from your program, they're gonna decide, all right, now I'm gonna move forward tactically with this way. This isn't go get a tax ID, all right? This isn't go get an EIN number and then get a logo and a website, all of a sudden you're in business. It doesn't work like that. It works by you methodically going through the process, figuring out what works, and then moving forward based on what your tribe, your group of people, the people that you want to serve, based on what they want. That's how you're able to move forward in business.
And that's it. That's it. Well, first of all, like I got a mortgage to pay. I can't, I'm not
Straight
22
up.
years old. I have to
Straight
make
up.
sure it's a proven business idea, right? Like some
Straight
people,
up.
they're
Oh, these
like,
folks got bills to
it's
pay.
great when you're 21 and you have no responsibilities and
Right,
you can
right.
go all. I'm like, we got bills to pay here.
Amen to
And
that.
so that's why I decided to do that. And the organization, and when you have a Fortune 20 officer of a company of that size tell you that you have a great idea and go start a business, I'm like, oh, don't tell me twice.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't have to tell me twice.
I'm out of there.
And as a result of fixing that problem, right?
Yeah.
I was invited to speak on stages there
Yeah.
within the org, over to 500 leaders and executives. And I said, okay, all right. And then I didn't even quit at the time. If you go deeper, once that was said to me, I said, you know what? I should test this idea. Let me see if other people outside the company would be interested. And that's when I built my website. That's when I started my YouTube. That's when I tested how to get clients through
Mhm.
LinkedIn, through reaching out. And I filled my first coaching program, and everybody in that program got such incredible success, and they didn't work for the company. One person did,
Mhm.
but everybody else didn't work for the same company. And I said, okay, now I have an idea. And that's when I decided, all right, now it's time to make the leap because I have tested something.
Right.
And then I started, that's when I started my business, and that's what motivated me. And that's where I am right now. So
Yeah.
currently, that's what I focus on, helping organizations. I do two things. I work with organizations to build inclusive cultures so that everybody can thrive, because when everybody thrives in your organization, they're going to be innovative. That's all going to contribute to your bottom line as a business. You want people to feel fulfilled. And then I work with leaders themselves and individuals themselves to identify what makes them truly distinctive so that they can advance within the organization, as well as understand how do you navigate organizational politics so that you can win. And then that's what brings me to my diva method, which
Right.
you alluded to.
Yeah, well, and before you explain it, can you kind of just speak to the people now that kind of feel hopeless? Because I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm doing this recording at the school I teach at, and we are in a situation where I just literally just had this conversation with a fifth grade teacher. Right now, she only has 4 kids from the Bahamas, but only 4 kids in the classroom. But she understands business, and she's in her mind like, yo, I'm more stressed out at the fact that there's not as many kids when we can be doing something to get more kids, but the job doesn't necessarily require a teacher to go out and pull in more kids and stuff like that. But, when it comes to the business aspect, we know that that's not going to work. How do you speak to those types of professionals who feel like the word she just kind of used was helpless? Like, there's something we can be like, what can we be doing? How do you kind of speak to people like that?
So people that are within organizations, they see a problem that needs to be fixed, but they're discouraged because
Exactly. They're
they
helpless.
feel like they feel helpless.
That's rampant, by the way.
Yeah, it is rapid. Well, here's the thing. I think first of all, we all have to realize that we all have agency. We may not be able to identify that agency and power yet within us, but it's already there. And looking for opportunities, right? So if you have, and that happened to me, the
Right.
first person I talked about, I came up with a solution. I saw the problem,
Mhm.
and the way that I literally was like, if y'all say this one more time, just go be more confident. That's not helpful.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yep.
jump out the way.
Yeah.
Like this is not the
Yep.
so
Right.
but why do I know? Because I've been there. I
Yeah.
know what's gonna work. And I'm also now, not just have I been there and I did the work, but when I was in the corporation, oh my gosh, I need to email this executive. I just thought about this. He was one of the persons, he approved me like $10,000 getting a coaching certification
Yeah.
while I worked for the company. And so I also not just went through it, but now I'm a trained coach. So now I know I have the skills to develop it.
Yeah.
And so I first pitched it so I got frustrated. It was a pain point, right? You have a problem, a pain point, you can fix it. I go and talk to the first person I talked to. It was like talking to a wall. Like I'm telling him, I'm explaining, he's like, this is what we need to do. And he looked at me and it was not landing. And he was like, okay. And I'm like, all right. So I go back. I lived in Boston at the time. I went to my room and I was just like, all right, I could just let this die or I'm going to push. I said, so clearly I identified 2 things. One, I wasn't communicating the problem and the need strong enough for other people who didn't get it to get it.
Right.
Second of all, I was talking to the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned around my talking points and put it in how it can not just how can it benefit the individuals, but how can it benefit the company? Because you have to show them how it's going to benefit the organization. So I had to change my talking points. And then the second thing, I spoke to female executives that came up through the ranks that went through that. And I said, look, you and I know what it's like. You know how it feels like. She's like, yes. So let's talk to this person. She's like, and she jumped all in. She was all in. But sometimes you're not talking to the right person, and sometimes you're not communicating the message effectively. And so you got to keep going and experimenting and testing until it lands, which is what I did. And as a result of the conversation with her, she introduced me to another decision maker that said, okay, all right, let's go with it.
Okay.
And that person was the one who ended up was just like, now start a business.
Yeah. So, and if you are listening now, to not only the teacher I was referring to, but the person that may be also in a situation where they're working, they feel helpless. It's all about being solution oriented. All right.
Solution
You're
oriented.
listening to 2 people that have been there probably more than you have. Okay. And you have to, every step of the way, you have to show up with a solution in hand. And even if you're not talking to the person that can take you to the next level in your mind. Once you've created that solution in your mind, then you can go to the next person, go to the next person. Then that solution becomes what you're all about and ultimately becomes what you build your entire business and framework around. Build your solution oriented mindset, and that ultimately is going to keep you from that helpless feeling. All right. Because we've been there. It sucks. Trust me, when you
It
have the
sucks.
ability, you have the skills, and you see numbers and you see people not moving aggressively, it can be incredibly frustrated if you don't make sure you are of the solution oriented mind. You have the solution oriented mindset. So, like I was telling you, I do want to be respectful of your time. Can you just speak on what's next, what you have in store? Where do you see your business like coming in the next 10, 15 years? What's the ultimate, like, the North Star for you?
Wow, that's a big question.
Hmm?
Well, one of the things that first of all, I want to give leaders two
Hmm.
things. I want to give leaders people the tools that they need to succeed in corporate. And frankly, not just corporate, because all these things that I talk about, all these methodologies that I talk about, helps you to succeed in life. We just talked about being problem solver,
Hmm.
right? Bringing innovative solutions. Actually, that's one of the themes of my business, bringing in innovative solutions. If you're able to approach that at work, at your church, in your basketball team,
Family,
all
family.
that,
Yeah,
family, friends,
it's
it
everything.
it it that mindset will help you all around. And
Exactly.
so it's giving people the tools, because a lot of people, like that woman, wants to make an impact,
Hmm.
but she doesn't have the tools. So it's giving the people the tools
Yep.
that will help them from a mindset standpoint overcome this like feeling of not just self-doubt and fear, but helplessness. Like, you have power and you have agency. Let's activate that.
Yeah.
And then the strategies now on for the individual, how to navigate organizational politics so that you can advance. But also, we know that there are a lot of people that are, I call them not good leaders, that are not good hearts, I would say, that
Hmm.
are in positions of leadership for very selfish reasons. And there are a lot of other people that actually want to contribute to the greater good of the world. They want, like you, right? Like,
Hmm.
doing this work in the community.
Right.
And I believe that when you have more good people in positions of leadership, more good can be done in the world. And so giving people like this, not just the confidence, but the tools so that they can advance professionally, we could absolutely change the face of leadership as it is today. So
Uh,
that's where my mind is.
Got it. And how can people get in touch with you if they want to hear more? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of folks that want to work with you.
Yeah, two ways. You can, first of all, I am very active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the place I hang out. So you
Yes,
can
ma'am. Yes,
find me.
ma'am.
You
I
you
am
could
too, by the
DM.
way.
You do? You hang out. Okay, good. DM me. I answer my DMs as long as you remain respectful.
Yes.
I will answer my DMs. So my name Kisha, Kisha, no E, and Winter with a Y, Wynter.
Right.
You find me on LinkedIn. You could also find out what I'm up to by going to my website, Your Power Unleashed with a
Mm.
D at the end.org. So those are the two places people can find me.
And we'll make sure we include that in the show notes as well. So, Keisha, the way I close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. I want you to pretend you are a teenage version of yourself. You're seeing your mother struggle. You yourself actually are probably struggling with an accent. You're coming to a brand new state. I'm sure you're getting made fun of. You're not sure where you're going to be landing. Pretend that teenage version of Keisha has come into the Zoom room. Give that young lady some words of encouragement about what life is going to be, and we'll officially close.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful vision.
Mhm.
It's, you have so much brilliance within you. You have so much insight within you. Don't give up. Stay grounded in what is important, what is true. Stay grounded with the people that are very important to you, and keep that vision alive and keep going for it. No matter what the obstacles and the opposition may say,
Mm.
you have a higher calling, and lean into it, because your time will come.
Mm. The mic is again, very rarely am I at a loss for words on this show, but officially we're gonna officially drop the mic with that because that was just excellent. It was heartfelt. And the reason I close out the show is with all that with that specific question is because for you as young people that may be going through that similar situation, she's talking directly to you to get you through whatever difficult moment you may be facing. So all that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.